G'day everyone, welcome to the Bothy. I'm Chris.
G'day, I'm Al.
We're here to see Gerard Rennick tonight, mate.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting.
Very interesting.
The People's Tour.
Yeah.
People's First.
Interesting crowd.
Interesting crowd. A lot of the same people that was at the last march.
And the march before.
So we'll do as much of the recording as we can. We'll get it on the channel and we'll catch up back later on.
Cheers, guys.
In the political parties broken down and we're no longer getting accountability and transparency. What we're seeing is when politicians get in, they actually don't know what to do next. And many people, we've had for a long time, we've been a very lucky country. It's the ones who come in at 44, 45, or the ones who do come in young have been there for 15 years and they still don't know what to do. And that's a real concern, because when they don't know what to do, they start going down rabbit holes and creating diversions from the things that really matter. And what we need to get back to, and like I said, I don't want to start labelling us any particular thing, but we need to stop fighting Labor on their turf, which is the culture wars. Okay, we are not going to win the culture. You will never knock Labor out of government fighting on things where you're dealing with feelings, because they have they are a party of very little facts, but they're very good at using emotion. We need to go back to playing on our field, which is basically good economic management, promoting the family, and feelings do matter, by the way, and emotions do matter, but who should be managing feelings and emotions? Big government or family? Family, exactly. So what we need to be focused on is actually empowering the family and the individuals, as I said before, and actually restraining the authority of big government. So the first, we've got 5 key policies. I'll run through them quickly and then I want to just break them down in a little bit more detail. The first one is to lift the tax-free threshold to $45,000. The second one is to pay childcare directly to the parents and not the childcare centres. The third one is to make superannuation voluntary. Now, those three, and I'll go through that in a bit more detail in a minute, but those 3 policies are all designed to put more money in people's pockets without actually costing the government anything. So we're not necessarily going to have to increase taxes there to do that. We're just channeling it away from superannuation funds and childcare centres to you directly so that you can make greater decisions. Now the next 2 policies are effectively, we want to reform the monetary and taxation system, and within that will be immigration's a component of that, because in many respects high immigration is the result of poor monetary and taxation decisions made 40 years ago. So we want to reform those decisions made 40 years ago, and we'll touch on that in a minute. But the key sell on that is that People First is the only party, and I've got one other guy on there, we'll give some credit there on the public bank too, but that has the know-how to fix the taxation system and the monetary system. And that's really, really important, because as I'm about to explain, it was the breakdown of certain rules and regulations we had around our monetary system back in the 80s that's led to the mess we're in today. So I'll just touch on that first policy of lifting the tax-free threshold to 40 grand. I'm of the view that basically if anyone gets out of bed and puts their nose to the grindstone, we should not be taxing them below the cost of living. Now, to be fair, 45 grand probably isn't, it's probably more like 55, 60, but at this stage we can only afford 45. But I think it's completely wrong that people are taxed below the cost of living. If you earn $45,000 today, you are going to lose $4,000 in tax and $6,000 in superannuation. You won't lose it, you just won't see it for another 40 years. Now, all that is going to do is drive people below the poverty line. And that then makes it harder for them to keep their car serviced, pay their mortgage, and it can effectively see them become, lose their houses or whatever. So we, ultimately, end of the day, the words of our national anthem is wealth and toil, and that is a virtue that I very strongly believe in, and I'm sure it's a virtue that many of you believe in very strongly as well. The other benefit of lifting the tax-free threshold to $45,000, and I think this is important as well, is if you're a pensioner on a full pension, that's currently $30,000. Lifting the tax-free threshold to $45,000 will actually enable you to earn another $15,000 a year before you pay any tax. So, if you are talking to people out in the markets, there's a lot of benefits to that, because by lifting the tax-free threshold to $45,000 too will save everyone $4,000 or approximately $4,000 in tax. And, there's 14 million workers, it's almost 15 million workers out there now, 3 million retirees and 3 million small business people. That's going to appeal to a lot of people. And I'm sure many of you have stayed in jobs in the past where you've worked for someone that you don't like, but because you needed the money, you held your nose and you stayed in the job anyway. So believe you me, money and more money in the pocket is very, very important. But the other benefit of also lifting the tax-free threshold to $45,000 is that it effectively makes superannuation, not quite, but almost redundant. Because if you can own your own house in retirement and say have $1.2 million in the bank earning, return of 4% or in shares or whatever, if you can earn your first $45,000 tax-free, you don't need to be paying a lifetime of fees to superannuation funds. And I'll touch on that in a minute. Now, we will pay for that by effectively means testing the defined benefit scheme for retired bureaucrats in Canberra. That's currently about a $340 billion liability that costs the government about $10 to $15 billion every year. A good example of someone who's on that scheme is David Anderson, the former managing director of the ABC. His final salary was $1.1 million. He was paid over $1 million for the 7 years he was the managing director of the ABC. He started working for the ABC back in the late 80s. So he would have been, he was probably on a high salary before he got to the $1 million mark. But that defined benefit scheme for him guaranteed that he will be paid 37% of that 1.1 million until he dies. So he was 56 when he retired. So it's quite possible he could get $400,000 a year for the next 30 years. He lived till 86, he might even live longer. That's 12 million bucks he's going to get on top of the millions he was paid yearly. Right? We want to means test that. Now, just to be clear, it's only retired bureaucrats, it's not the military scheme, and it's not the state schemes for teachers and nurses or anything like that. It's purely applied to the backroom bureaucrats. And if you are ever becoming candidates in future, or you're just talking about policy on behalf of people first, always be careful to distinguish between bureaucrats and public servants. Public servants are our teachers and our nurses and our policemen. They're out on the front line every day. They are doing the job of what government should be doing of serving us, or at least most of the time. We'll just pretend COVID didn't happen, but pretending COVID didn't happen, of course it did, but in theory, they should be serving us. I mean, my mum was a nurse, she was a shift worker, I know how hard she worked. So we want to be just careful that we only bash the bureaucrats and not our public servants, especially our frontline workers. And the other thing, so that will pay for about half the cost of it. The other half, there's one other thing that we'll also get rid of, and that's subsidies for renewables. If renewables really are cheaper, then they shouldn't need to be subsidised. It's that simple, and that's estimated to save about $8 billion as well. But the other thing is Treasury don't model secondary impacts. So they assume that there is no velocity money on tax cuts. And of course that discriminates against tax cuts to low income earners. Treasury assume that if you gave a $2,000 tax cut to someone on $40,000, they wouldn't spend that money in the economy in the next 12 months. That's clearly wrong. And it actually discriminates against tax cuts, which I don't like because I hate income tax. Our policy, I want to bring in another policy to eliminate income tax between 45,000 and 100,000, where we just lower the tax rate from 30 cents to zero by lowering it by 2 cents over 15 years. Because in 15 years, literally if you're on 80 grand now, you're lucky to survive. I'll explain why in a minute. So that's our first, more money in your pocket policy. The second one is obviously we want to pay childcare to the parents. Can I take questions? I'll take questions. I'll come here first. Childcare, the institutionalised childcare today discriminates against shift workers. It discriminates against people out in the regions who live out on farms, basically fly in, fly out workers, but in particular shift workers. So if you're yet again a nurse or a policeman working shift work, if you're working in hospitality, if you're working on weekends, we have a lot of weekend workers. I've got a friend who sings in a wedding band, and he sings there, and his other cohort in the wedding band, his wife. So he has to pay a small fortune to get a babysitter if they can't use their parents on the weekend. So sometimes they're barely making any money from because they're professional musicians. And I'd like to be a professional musician just to be paid more money, because professional musicians don't earn a lot of money. But I do love live music, so we need our live musicians. So there are millions of people that miss out on that, and I think it's unfair that these shift workers can't access what I call institutionalised childcare between 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning through to 5 or 6 o'clock at night. There's also, though, fly-in, fly-out workers. I mean, they often work 10 days on, 7 days off. I know there are people in Melbourne that will fly to Perth and out to the mines in Western Australia or up in Queensland as well. And then, obviously, the other people that might also help is actually parents themselves. Because if they're getting paid, an extra bit of money, they can either do one or two things. They might be able to pay their grandparents to come and look after their children, and that's good, because it's really, really important that, as you get older, that you know who your grandparents are. I'm standing here today because I want my children and our children to have the same opportunities as our forefathers gave to us. And I'm old enough to remember 3 of my grandparents. One of my maternal grandfather passed away before I was born. But I'm a big believer that having a memory of your grandparents is it's the love that we have for our parents and our children that drives us to do better. And that's why I believe in the family values. And that's why if we can actually, encourage parents to stay at home a little bit longer with their children, or encourage a better relationship, or facilitate a better relationship between children and their grandparents. And grandparents, I mean, I know my grandmother, my paternal grandmother once said to me, she used to love, looking after grandkids. She said it was stressful bringing up her own children. And it was, because she had 4 children before the war and then 4 children after the war. One of them was actually blinded by a drug sulfur drug back in the early 50s. And of course, no compensation or anything back then. It just had to suck it up. So I could see why it would have been quite stressful time raising children throughout the war. But, so it also will bring great joy to grandparents, and probably give them, something to, keep them going for those grandparents that want to look after children as well. So I'm a big believer that this can only be good for society. But so look, that one I think is pretty self-evident. And of course, the third one is we want to make superannuation voluntary.
Childcare to parents, not providers. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Get rid of those middle sucking.
The bloody leeches are like just rotting the system.
And like you said, let the grandparents connect with the kids. If you could pay money to the grandparents that you're normally given to childcare, grandparents would take that.
Yeah. Supplements
their pension, gives them a bit of spending money.
Yep.
I mean,
and it brings family more together.
Exactly right.
Yeah. It's a win-win, really.
It's a win-win. The main thing is all of that fraud disappears from the system, mate.
All those middlemen with their hands out.
Exactly right. Income tax. So raising the tax-free threshold to $45,000 to help those that need it the most. So
another good idea.
Yeah, $4,000 straight in the pocket of those that need it most. So that's great.
Yeah.
And then a little bit of rent stress or mortgage stress or whatever it is goes away.
Yeah.
$4,000 isn't the be all and end all, but it makes a difference.
But it's a little bit.
It is. It's $80 a week.
It's something.
It means people might actually get 3 meals a day, be able to feed their kids, not live in their car.
And buy something other than processed food. Good on you guys. See ya.
See ya.